Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. The live today is about something that is the biggest struggle for me personally, which is the power of boundaries, the power of saying no. And I've been trying to understand how to create boundaries and how to say no and stand up for myself for so many years, and I have miserably failed. So I decided to bring in both the psychological perspective and the spiritual perspective of setting boundaries. So maybe I can understand it and you can understand it, and this will get embedded in our brains, in our minds, so we can really implement it in our day-to-day lives. So I have asked Dr. Terry Cole, a psychotherapist who has written the book Boundary Boss, and a spiritual coach, a spiritual counselor, Sudie Burnett, to join us and discuss the power of saying no and having boundaries. So let's ask them both to join us. Invite Terry. All right. So both invites are now sent. Hey, Mirza girl, Irfan Shah. Uh, Hello, City June. How are you?
Namaste, Megan. It's so good.
Namaste, namaste. So good to see you.
Same here, love. Same here.
So we are waiting on Terry to talk about the boundary boss and the power of saying no. Uh, I think Terry just joined us. The invite has been sent. Hold on one second. Yes, waiting for Terry to join us. Let's see if, do you see Terry?
Terry, let's see. I think she's here, Megan.
Is she?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to have an amazing live today. It's about how do we say no and set our boundaries, hold on to our boundaries without feeling guilty, right? This life is very important because we have to learn to set our boundaries, not only set our boundaries, but also keep our boundaries, being aware of all the apps that are open that making us not to be able to hold our boundaries. And when the ego mind is telling us that, oh, you should feel guilty, you cannot say no to mom, or you cannot say no to this or that. So do you see Terry, Megan?
She keeps trying to join us, and I accept her, but I don't
Something
know.
comes up. Okay. So till Terry join us, guys, tell me or tell us, do you feel guilty when you set boundaries and hold on your boundaries, and maybe you have to be in a place to protect yourself, but then again you feel like, oh, this is my mom is going to get mad, she's not going to like it if I say I want to be in my own space, or my wife, or my kids, or my sister. So tell us, guys, write a comment for us and tell us, do you know how to set up healthy boundaries? Yes or no? It's very hard, guys, because so many apps are on in play. Ooh, I think she's
Terry,
here.
join! Yes, perfect.
Hello. Oh,
Hello, hello. Terry, I think your reception isn't great because it's blurry. The picture is blurry. Little bit.
I'm not sure why. Hold on. Could it just be that, maybe? How's that? Is that better?
Still a little blurry.
All right. Let me see. If there's something else I could change. Anyway, hello.
Okay, we're ready to go. Welcome, everybody. I have the honor today of having Sudie Burnett, a spiritual counselor, and Terry Cole, a psychological counselor, to bring in both the psychological and spiritual aspects of setting boundaries into our conversation. I'm here because for many years I suffered from the disease of codependency, lack of boundaries, oversharing, and overgiving. And every time I took the bait of one of the things I just mentioned to you, I ended up feeling hurt, broken, and destroyed. And it took me a long time to get out. And this last time, when I got out of a situation that, due to my oversharing, codependency, and lack of boundaries, the last time I got out, I promised myself that I am going to learn to create ironclad boundaries. And I'm going to the root of understanding why I overshare and overgive, and I have codependency to begin with.
Mhm.
So here we are. Let's go, ladies.
Woohoo!
So Terry has a book called Boundary Boss. And my dear friend, Dr. Amen, told me about this book, and I read it, and it's so empowering. And as a woman, I understood why I've been giving in to my own boundaries, and I've been betraying my own boundaries. And one thing I learned is if you betray your own self by not respecting your own boundaries, everybody else on the outside world will betray you. Because, as Sudhijun always says, the universe is a mirror of your self love and your self worth. So I'm ready to get started. Where do you like to start about the boundary boss?
I like to start with boundaries. First of all, normalizing your exact experience, Megan, and normalizing why we as women in pretty much every culture in the world, because I've taught my courses in 195 countries. Do you know what I mean? And nobody was like, oh, yeah, my parents taught me all about healthy boundaries. I get it. No, all are like you. What did we learn in childhood? Be a good girl, turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like nobody was like, you know what? I think you should assert yourself. No, that was not the messages that we were getting. So I think that because a lot of my high performing, like you, clients are like, I figured out all of life. Why can't I figure out this one thing? Like we're very smart and we're incredibly capable. It's not about that. It's about the unconscious messaging that we got about being good and being valuable, and being a real woman means being super self-sacrificing. So the fact that whoever's watching this now or after the fact, if you're like, I'm like Megan was, my boundaries are a disaster, you're for good reason, right? I want you to think about the way that I like to frame boundaries is I want you to think about them like your own personal rules of engagement, right? Our boundaries let people know what's okay with us and what is not okay with us. They are comprised of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, like the non-negotiables you have in your relationships. And what I've noticed in 25 years of being a psychotherapist in the trenches with my clients is that not only do most people not know their preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers, even if you do know them, do you have the language to communicate them readily to other people? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. So I really want us to look at this like learning a new language, becoming fluent in the language of boundaries, which will be specific to you and unique to you because we're all so different, introverts and extroverts, and we're all different people. But it's like learning a language, and you certainly wouldn't feel bad about yourself if you weren't fluent in Mandarin because you really wanted to be, right? You would go, oh, I need a teacher. I need to learn. And what we really need to do is unlearn the ways that we were conditioned in childhood. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So then when it comes to when you mention that we all need to know what we like, our desires, and what our no-nos are, a lot of times, even though I personally know what I want and what I don't want, I do not speak my truth because I fear being rejected and abandoned. And I always ask Sudi, I said, Sudi June, if you look at this whole concept of boundaries from a spiritual perspective, when we lack boundaries and we get hurt, what is the universe trying to teach us? And why would that soul with lack of boundaries choose to come to the earth without boundaries? Sudi June.
Okay. You. First of all, Terry, I'm so glad to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Same.
Um, I'm so happy that this connection took place through Megan.
That's it.
That is wonderful. Okay, so um, before we get into the spiritual part of it, the part that I want to look at is I realized in the past 40 years that I've been coaching and teaching, I realize we all come with four apps. The first one being self-love or lack of self-love. The second one, worthiness or unworthiness, being deserving. And the fourth one is being enough. So
Mm.
generally, I feel like the outer world is a presentation of our self-love. And it all goes back, as Terry knows better, is all about the 7 years in our childhood. There are caregivers, our parents. Were they available when our needs was taking place? And I was just talking about it. I did a before this live, I was doing a Farsi live. I'm Iranian about abandonment issue, and I said a few years back I was doing. Session with this lady, and she was crying, and she says, when I was 7 years old, when the school finished, all parents came and they picked up their children, and I had to stay there for 1 hour. And I said, imagine how a 7-year-old feels at that moment when there is so much fear is coming out, and the way the translation of the mind, probably I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not important. And imagine if we take this scenario in our day-to-day lives,
Mm.
how we are being treated with our in our upbringing through our parents. So if something like this happened to you, or when you're talking to your parents, especially in our culture, Terry, maybe you're not very familiar with Iranian culture, is like we have busy parents, and it's not really like most parents are physically there, but emotionally they're not present and they're not available. And this brings that abandonment issue in many ways in our lives. So when it comes to setting up boundaries, it's all about safety.
Mhm.
When I come to my mother or when I come to my parents and I'm trying to tell them how I feel, are my parents really listening to me? Are they present with me? Are they really hearing what I'm trying to express? Or are they just brushing it off like, oh, so what? You should have seen what my mother did when I was a kid, and blah blah blah. You think you have it bad? See how bad I
I
have
had it.
it. And your emotion is totally ignored into your parents. So if I feel when I want to talk and I set boundaries that I want to open up my throat chakras, and
Mm.
especially during all these years, I see so many women, they have shut down chakras because even though we were going to set up boundaries, it didn't come across that way, because the minute we come to speak our truth, the minute I come to express myself, they make me wrong, therefore I don't feel safe. After a while, I don't feel safe to be expressive. I cannot, even though as a child I can see the truth, but when it comes to outer reality, that truth is not being served. And I feel like I cannot do this. I set up boundaries. I keep on breaking my boundaries, and then I end up somebody who has anger issues and is just so much resentment towards our family, and we don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yes, I want to say something about that, if I may.
Sure.
It's so, oh my God, so accurate what you're describing, how it impacts us. And think about as children in the formative years, as you were describing, that nobody needs to tell us how to avoid pain.
Mm.
Nobody needs to tell us, like, we don't need to get like a little handbook. We know if you have a parent who, let's say, has an addiction issue, right? You as a kid, we're so adaptive because we are the most captive audience. You can't like hitch your ride to go get your own apartment at the age of 7. You're not doing that. So we know we literally need these people to
Mm.
survive. And so what power do you have as a child to assert your feelings? And once you do it and your parents say, we don't care, and I had it worse than you, as you said, we learn. We don't do that too many times before we go, that's not safe. I'm not doing that. So there is so much unlearning that we must do. And again, I feel like a lot of people resist doing this work, and maybe you guys see this as well, because we grow up and we love our parents. Like we're like, okay, listen, they did better than their parents. Or we go, oh, but my father got sober 10 years ago, so I don't want to focus on, or I don't want to hang out in the past because he got clean now. It's great. And I always say to my therapy clients, who doesn't care about your father getting his 10-year chip now? The 5-year-old you, right? The children within each of us, we get stuck at different phases of development where there were injuries that happened. And so the whole point of going back, like I know a lot of therapists are really into like going back and hanging out in 3rd grade. I'm only interested in going back to the experiences in the lives of my clients that are keeping them from creating the life they want now, right? It's important to get the whole history. Sure, we do that, but there's no reason to hang out in the past unless you being left at school, as that story that you shared, that person for an hour, let's say, when everyone else was being picked up, if that was a pivotal moment in that little kid's development of their self-worth or lack thereof, then it's important to go back and unpack it, integrate it, be honest about it. And I feel like that's a lot of what the work that I do with people and how I walk you through it in the book is. We have to go back to see what are these pivotal, these sort of peak bad experiences we've had in our young lives that continue to inform our relational patterns and the way we do or don't set boundaries, how enmeshed or separate we are in our relationships, whether we are anxiously attached, whether we're insecurely attached, or whether we're securely attached. All of those things are impacted by what happened in childhood. So I feel like a lot of times people will be like, let's just start from here and go forward. Like, why we got to go back? I'm like, listen, if we could just start from here and go forward, trust me, I would. In my experience, it doesn't work if we don't honor what were those experiences. And you don't have to linger forever, but I do walk you through the process of doing an inventory of it. What I call this is your downloaded boundary blueprint, right? We all have this unconscious material in the basement of our minds that we don't really look at often. A lot of times we don't even know it's there, which is the way we think the world is or the way it's supposed to be. And what ends up happening when we start, I walk you down the steps into the basement and we open up some dusty boxes and figure out, oh, why am I afraid to tell my partner that I don't like something that they're doing? The answers are in the basement, right? The answers are here. I don't have the answers, right? I'm just a damn good GPS to get people to their own truth about why they're relating the way that they are. And once we have that figured out, go, oh my gosh, the women in my family, I could say personally, the women in my family were kind of male bashers. Like that was the family system that I came from. It was very female um, heavy. We had lots and lots of women and only a couple of guys in there. And most of the guys didn't stick around for too long, and I kind of don't blame them. But what I learned, right, was that I had to get in my own therapy. I had to decide, do I believe that? Do I think that men are inferior? Do I think that's funny? Do I want to interact? And it was a risk to decide, like, no, I actually want in my life, I want a partnership with someone who we're equal and we're co-pilots and we're whatever the thing is. But that took me differentiating from the family system. And this is the same thing with boundaries. When you decide, if you have an enmeshed family system where nobody was allowed to be different, and then you decide through getting healthy enough to be different, what do we risk? Exactly, Megan, what you said at the top. We risk being rejected. We risk being abandoned. And yet, what I found in my own family system is that my family was way more flexible than I thought they would be, and that a lot of my fears were amplified because they were my child's fear, the child within me. It wasn't my grown up adult fear. Does it make sense?
Mhm. So for me, back to what you mentioned, that as a child, you're stuck in a family dynamic, which creates that blueprint of boundaries in your brain, right?
Yep.
Because as a child, you're helpless. You're not empowered to make your own decisions, right? So you're at the mercy of your parents in a way, right? And you have to create a whole blueprint of boundaries to adapt to them to survive. Now, 30 years later, here I am sitting as a woman, and I've caught myself following the same pattern. What is that pattern? In my childhood, when I felt like uh, one of my parents have had certain characteristics that I don't necessarily like, I was able to drastically dissociate from that part of mine that registered the issues about that parent, because my livelihood and my survival was dependent on that parent. So I closed my eyes,
Mhm.
ignored everything,
Yeah.
and I said, this parent is my God.
Mhm.
I worship this parent. Whatever this person says, I do.
Mhm.
Now, 30 years later, I'm no longer a child, but I'm following the same pattern where I meet someone, I see the red flags, I see the characteristics I don't like, whether it's a business partner, a man or woman, doesn't matter what role that person plays. But the need for codependency, the need for survival in me kicks in, and I dissociate, and I close my eyes to all the red flags, and I jump in, and that person becomes my
Yeah.
God. And even when my boundaries are violated, I still dissociate from that and I still deny it, because in my subconscious mind, my livelihood depends on that person. Now,
Which is not true now, though, which is interesting, Megan, right? Because it is a child that it was true about, right? Where we can't go out on our own, we can't get a job, we can't, but the reality as a grown-up woman is that your livelihood, your life is really not dependent on this person. And yet, because of the old tapes, right? Because of what's in the unconscious mind, it feels like life or death, right?
yes. And Surijun, when again looking at Surijun looks at everything from the spiritual perspective, which
Mhm.
is to me, it's like a helicopter flying above
Yes.
your mind and your body
Yep.
and looking down. When a soul is entangled in a codependent dynamic, um, what do you think that soul needs to believe in its own self and understand, and to be able to quieten that ego, that inner child that says your livelihood depends on this person? So no matter who this person is, betray yourself, step over your own boundaries,
Mhm.
and attach to them.
Mm. Well, in shamanism, we say every time a trauma happens, a part of soul will fragment, right? So the way I work is look at the, for instance, Akashic record and see what's in the soul journey.
Mm.
So when we look at the blueprint of the soul journey, Then there are the lessons. So the way I think it helps people is, number one, to tell them this is where the trauma happens. This is a part of soul that disassociates. So every time a major trauma happens, as a part of soul disassociate or fragment, there is a emptiness in your energetic field.
Mhm.
And this emptiness in this energetic field, what goes on in this area is you don't feel whole, you don't feel incomplete, you feel like something is missing, but you don't know what it is. So the way we work in shamanism is to tell you the Akashic record before your soul even enter this realm. What lessons did you take? So, for instance, abandonment issues or um, lack of empowerment or lack of self love, these are the classes that I took. So, once I tell you that, Megan, in this part, you as a child, it was so hurtful that you're just deassociate from that, and now your mind and ego has chosen a way or approach for survival. You are constantly in a survival mode. But if I tell you that before you enter this realm, you chose these parents specifically,
Mhm.
that this guy is going to sign a contract, that he's going to be the best character for you to learn this lesson, and you chose your mother because of this, and this is the lesson. So how else can we give this a meaning? The minute I understand, oh, so the class is abandonment issue,
Mhm.
and the mother and the father played these roles for the film to take place. Now you and I, as our adult self, is going to be dealing with the inner child, and we're going to be protecting the inner child, because we deal a lot of stuff that we do is the inner child who feels abandoned, is the inner child who never felt
Mhm.
love. So once we make a deeper connection with our inner child, and we sometimes, I say, just to approach the inner child and apologize for when that child went through that trauma, nobody was there to protect him or her or take care of her. And
Right.
now you give assurance to that inner child that, you know what, from now on, I'm sorry, I apologize that nobody was there. I wasn't there to, but now as a parent, as we changing this role, now as a parent, I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to see what your need is. So we need to create that feeling of security. And the minute you feel secure and protected, and you know that the lesson is abandonment, you're shedding the light of awareness. And I always say, I said, when the awareness comes, when we move to a higher consciousness, awareness sort of dissolve everything, and
Mhm.
all our traumas and everything, with the knowing that I took this lesson and this is why I took it and what lesson I had to learn. The majority of time we can overcome it from an empowered place.
Mhm.
So to me, my understanding is that is the moment of awakening. If we look at it from a spiritual perspective,
Mhm.
you're meant to learn a lesson. You keep bumping your head against the wall over and over again. At some point, you get injured and you get hurt so bad that your breakdown leads you to your breakthrough, which is awakening, right?
Mm.
Now, if we bring that, Terry, to the psychological
Mhm.
level, how would you describe that awakening moment and what needs to be done afterwards so we unlearn
Mhm.
that whole genetics, that whole program,
Yeah.
that pre-program that we're born with, the what do you call it, boundary, the blueprint of our boundaries.
Yeah.
How can we now unlearn and rewire our programming?
I think what Sudi June said was exactly right, in that the reframe that you shared was about, instead of this is happening to me, there's a part of that reframe that says this is happening for me. So anyway, I just wanted to identify with that, because I think it's very powerful that when we go, oh, this is an assignment. Now it's my job to do the assignment, which is different than feeling super victimized by the experience, which is, it's an empowering way that you described it, and I really appreciated it. Back to the psychological aspect, because I do think these things, of course, overlap. And so much of what you were saying, Sudha June, is very much what I talk about just in psychotherapeutic terms, but really we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the awareness piece, I've got like the 5 pillars of transformation, psychological transformation, that I created to walk my clients through. And the first one is self-awareness, because obviously you cannot change anything that you're unaware of or that you're in denial of, right? Anything that we minimize, anything that we go, wasn't that bad, even though it was bad, right? And there's nothing wrong with admitting that it was bad, but if we deny it, we will not give it the attention and the time. And if we don't do that, we can't integrate it. It's like, so I see this moment of, I walk people through going through the downloaded boundary blueprint, where they get to see, how did you live? Were you allowed to have privacy? Were there people in your family? Were other people allowed to think different? Or was it more of a group think situation, and that if you thought different, that you would be ostracized from the group? There's all different questions that I have like 25 questions I have people answer to start to really get a black and white picture, like a snapshot of, did you grow up with, let's say, a mother or mother figure who was a boundary disaster? Were they a pushover? Were they like a rug that everybody walked on? Did you learn that having the disease to please was the way to be feminine, was the way to be a woman? And especially if we really love and identify with this maternal figure in our life, we're unconsciously very attached to recreating that. Exactly, Megan, as you were saying, like with the romantic situation, where what you were describing before is that we unconsciously, it's almost like an energetic recognition of people who are like appropriate mating material. Even if you couldn't stand the way one of your parents behaved, let's say, if it was a father, right? I had a father who was very unavailable, right? Even though as a child that gave me so much pain and I couldn't stand that, as soon as I started dating, who was I attracting? Unavailable people. Because unconsciously I was like, you seem like good husband material. Even at 17, there was some recognition where what I say about this is that the cracked pot always finds the cracked lid, because we have stuff we need to work out with that person. And when we find someone that provokes those childhood injuries, it really is an opportunity to heal. The way that I teach this, I would rather you take a class with me, take a book, find a teacher, go to a shaman, do something in a proactive way, so that we're not waiting and hoping that our cracked lid is going to find us, and that they're going to be well enough or therapized enough or evolved enough to work it out with us. I feel like it's a better shot of you going, you know what, I've got some of these things I'd like to figure out about myself and my boundaries or my communication stuff or whatever it is, and I'm going to figure that out. But anyway, long way around the barn to get back to the question, which was, when is this the moment of awakening, of awareness, Megan, that you were talking about? So much of it has to do with the waking up to the fact that there's always 2 things happening. There's always a parallel process going on in our relationships and in our lives. The one thing is the thing we're doing in real time right now. And the other thing is the way we interpret that thing. The parallel process is like, is the child in us playing out these unresolved injuries, because we can only act it out or talk it out. So if people don't know that they can talk it out, they endlessly act out these wounds in their relationships, and it's super unsatisfying and very painful. And it's like you're in a Groundhog Day of lack of satisfaction in your relationships. So anyway, I don't know if I answered the question, but it's the awareness piece that you have a choice, that you can unlearn and you can learn something new. And you don't have to be in a relationship to do it. It's the relationship with yourself. Hopefully that will motivate you doing it.
Now, as a woman who is right now going through the process of implementing the teachings
Mhm.
into my subconscious mind after having an awakening moment about my boundary issues, being a boundary disaster. Well, let's say, no, this is the best way. As a boundary disaster woman myself, I am a boundary disaster,
Mhm.
which means that throughout my life, I have allowed a lot of people to walk all over me to make me feel betrayed. And it's not on them, it's on me because I betrayed me.
Yep.
I stepped over my own boundaries. So the universe is just a mirror. So, as a woman who's going through that journey right this moment, I would like all women out there to know that when your boundaries are violated and you are not expressing your needs or you are not protecting yourself, you
Mhm.
are basically turning that anger inwards
Yeah.
and you start to attack your own self, which can manifest as autoimmune diseases, which can manifest as a lot of different diseases. Now, in the practice I am doing right now is that in that split moment between me becoming aware that somebody's violating my boundaries and somebody's hurting me, and the moment of me saying, oh, no, 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 this didn't happen, and turning it on myself, oh, I'm the one and wrong, and before I
Yep.
start attacking myself, there's a
Yep.
split second
Mhm.
of aligning your subconscious mind with the
Mhm.
conscious mind. Because here the conscious mind is saying, this situation is hurting
Yep.
me. The subconscious mind, the unconscious mind is saying, oh, deny it. The ego is saying, deny it,
Yep.
go into it. No, it didn't happen. It was your own fault.
Yep.
I want to ask both of you this question. What is the best tool we can offer to those women to stay present in that split second and align their conscious mind with their unconscious? Sudhi June, you go first.
Okay. Well, you see, when you tell other people to set up boundaries, is just a cliche because everybody knows we are intelligent enough to know what's right and what's wrong. The question is, even though we know, why can't we still do it? Right?
Mhm.
So basically, it's a lot of deeper underground that we have to look at. If you don't feel safe and secure, you can tell all you want, I'm going to set my boundaries and I'm going to hold it. But if you feel unsafe, you're going to hang on to anything and anyone who's present in front of you. The fear of losing somebody, I mean, let's look at this. How often do we see women and men stay in an abusive relationship where they are abused mentally, emotionally, physically, but they still stay there?
Mhm.
What is it? I think, Terry can correct me too, I think it's because deep inside I don't feel safe. Is a heavy fear that this relationship, although it's very bad, I'm being hurt, but at least I'm not alone. This situation is familiar. And I often think that we just repeat our parents' behavior and upbringing. So if I'm growing up in an abusive relationship in my childhood, if my parents are being abusive or nasty to one another, that's what's familiar to me. And when I get older, I always get myself into a relationship that's picturing my parents' relationship,
Mhm.
whether it's healthy or unhealthy.
Yep.
So often as human being, we don't know how a healthy relationship looks like,
Yep.
right? So we just going to be in bad relationship because that's all we know. Oftentimes I ask people, Can you tell me what is a healthy relationship? And most people don't have any clue how the healthy relationship has to be. So, in order to set boundaries, I have to feel safe and secure first, right? How do I create? The question is, how do I create this situation for myself that I'm feeling safe and secure? That if I say no to someone and they leave, I'm not gonna lose myself. I'm still gonna be safe. I'm still gonna be okay. Saying no to people and situation needs a lot of courage.
Mhm.
And most of us don't have that courage to say no because we are dependent and codependent to others in so many ways.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying. So to piggyback on that, for many people, love and pain went like that really early in life. And so even though you hate it, it's what you recognize as love. It's so painful. And so the first thing is there's got to be the recognition that we have the power to go like this, that it doesn't have to be painful, that love can be beautiful and gentle and kind, and that's possible. And I think that before we can do the boundaries that we're talking about, the healing of the childhood trauma has to come in. We have to pour love into ourselves. And the moment, Megan, you had said that there's a split second moment where I call this, when I'm teaching people this, there's this thing I call the in between, where you're in between the old shit you used to do, to deny, to depersonalize, to make excuses for, to say it wasn't that bad, right there, and the new skill set of setting boundaries with ease and grace, having the language, being able to say, hey, I'd like to make a simple request that you let me know if you're going to be 10 minutes late. That I would really feel considered if you would do that. Like, believe it or not, these are things that the more you do it, it will just fall out of your mouth. Like, it will happen as the healing happens. And your question was, how do we grab onto that moment and pivot towards the healthy and away from the known, right? That's basically your question.
Yes.
And I think that one of the most impactful things that I have ever done with my clients and for myself is having a dedicated meditation practice. And it's like you gain about 2 seconds of reaction time, which for me was life changing. It was enough to not hit send on that mean email, or to not react and explode on someone, or to not self-abandon. In that moment, when I had to go to the left, which is the healthy thing, or go to the right, which is the old, familiar, unhealthy thing, that meditation twice a day on a daily basis. And I've been doing it for like 20 years, but in the beginning, I was such a hothead. I was such a boundary disaster. Had no clue as to what was going on. But the most discernible change from having a dedicated practice was gaining just 2 seconds to choose the new behavior.
Wow. And what I'm understanding here is that in that split moment, hold on to you, stay with you before you get fragmented and torn in between two directions. Hold on to you and feel safe with you. So, ladies, we are all in this together. To all my boundary disaster ladies that are like myself, when you are having a moment of getting torn between the old you and the new you, find safety within your own self. Hold on to yourself before you hold on to the person in front of you, or to
Yes.
the child in your subconscious mind, to your inner child. Hold on to you and feel safe in you. So I'd love to wrap up this beautiful conversation by inviting our viewers to have a moment of feeling safe in their own body and grounding in their own body. And I would love for Terry to share with us one affirmation for us to feel safe in our bodies, and then for Sudhi to end the conversation with a grounding meditation. Terry, please.
I think that I keep my affirmations very simple. And really, I am lovable. I am worthy. I remind myself when I'm feeling insecure or when I'm about to self abandon, especially in my younger life, that I'm worthy. I don't have to throw a parade. I don't have to make somebody dinner. I'm literally worthy by virtue of being alive, and so is every one of you. So just remember and say to yourself, I am worthy.
I am worthy. Sudhijun, we're ready for you.
Okay, so if we can all take a moment and just put both hands on our heart and take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, and just repeat after me. I love
I
you.
love you.
I love you. You are safe. You are protected.
You're protected.
The universe and the angels are watching over you.
The universe and the angels are watching over you.
They are protecting you. You are being so much loved
Being
from the upper above. Love yourself. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself from this moment on. Promise yourself that you, no matter how many programs are active, no matter how much you have been conditioned, from this moment on, stand up for yourself. You come first and start loving yourself and give yourself the attention that you need. I love you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for creating this platform. Terry, I love you. You are such a beautiful soul. And thank you so much for all of you to be here. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sudhi. Love you both. Thank you so much
Love you.
for
You too.
making this life easier and more joyful for all of us.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.